Most people grow up believing that money is something solid, something neutral, something fair. We're taught that if we work hard, save diligently, and play by the rules, money will faithfully store the value of our effort. It feels almost instinctive to trust it, the same way we trust gravity or time. But very few people ever stop to ask a more uncomfortable question. Who controls money? And what happens when those controllers are human? Modern currencies are not governed by nature. They are not bound by physical scarcity or immutable laws. They are designed, adjusted, expanded, and restricted by people. Committees decide how much new money should exist. Central banks decide when money should become cheaper or more expensive. Governments decide when extraordinary measures are necessary, and those measures almost always involve creating more currency out of nothing. At first glance, this system appears reasonable. After all, emergencies happen, wars break out, economies slow down. Politicians and economists assure us that these tools are used responsibly, carefully, and in the best interest of society. But the problem isn't intention. The problem is incentive. When human beings are given the power to manipulate money, that power will eventually be used to serve those closest to it. Inflation is rarely presented honestly. It's framed as a technical adjustment, a mild and manageable phenomenon. In reality, inflation is a silent transfer of wealth. It doesn't announce itself dramatically. It creeps in quietly, reducing purchasing power year after year, eroding savings, and punishing anyone who chooses patience over speculation. You don't see it deducted from your bank account, but you feel it every time your money buys a little less than it used to. What makes this especially cruel is that most people never consented to this arrangement. No one asked permission to dilute the value of their labor. No one voted on whether their savings should slowly decay. Participation in fiat currency systems is mandatory by design. You earn in it, you pay taxes in it, you store your life energy in it. Opting out is not presented as an option. Those closest to the source of money creation live in a different reality. When new currency enters the system, it doesn't reach everyone at the same time. It flows first through governments, financial institutions, and asset markets. By the time it reaches everyday people, prices have already adjusted. The wealthy see assets inflate. The middle class sees costs rise. The poor are left scrambling just to stay afloat. This is not a conspiracy. It's a structural consequence of human-controlled money. When rules can be bent, they will be bent. When exceptions can be made, they will be made. And when mistakes happen, the cost is almost never paid by those who caused them. It's absorbed by society at large, spread thin enough that outrage dissolves into resignation. Over time, something subtle but dangerous happens. People stop thinking in decades and start thinking in months. Saving feels pointless. Long-term planning feels naive. Risk-taking becomes mandatory, not because people want to gamble, but because standing still guarantees loss. The system quietly pushes everyone toward speculation, debt, and dependence. And yet, despite all this, money retains its aura of authority. Questioning it feels radical, even irresponsible. We're told this is simply how the world works, that complexity requires experts, that stability requires control. But history tells a different story. Every monetary system controlled by humans eventually bends toward abuse, collapse, or both. The deeper truth is uncomfortable. Money, as it exists today, is not a neutral measuring tool. It is a mechanism of power. And power, when centralized and adjustable, is always vulnerable to human weakness. Greed, fear, ambition, and political pressure don't disappear just because they wear the language of economics. Most people sense this intuitively. They may not articulate it in economic terms, but they feel it in their lives. They feel it when raises don't keep up with costs, when savings accounts feel pointless, when working harder no longer guarantees security. A quiet frustration grows, paired with a sense of helplessness. The system doesn't collapse all at once. It slowly convinces people that instability is normal, that erosion is inevitable, that the best they can do is adapt and hope they're not the last ones holding devalued currency when the rules change again. This is the world Bitcoin was born into, not as an act of rebellion, but as a response to a monetary system shaped by human discretion rather than unbreakable rules. Before Bitcoin can be understood, this reality must be faced honestly, because Bitcoin is not about getting rich. It is about escaping a game that was never designed to be fair in the first place. Trust is the invisible foundation of any monetary system. Money itself has no intrinsic meaning beyond the collective belief that it will hold value tomorrow. The moment that belief weakens, the entire structure begins to crack. And across the world, quietly and persistently, that trust has been eroding. For decades, people were told that inflation was a small price to pay for stability, that central banks knew what they were doing, that short-term pain would always lead to long-term balance. But lived experience has begun to contradict those assurances. People are working longer hours, carrying more debt, and saving more aggressively than previous generations, yet feeling less secure than ever. Each financial crisis leaves behind more than economic damage. It leaves psychological scars. When markets collapse and are then rescued by freshly created money, an uncomfortable message is sent. Losses are socialized, but gains remain private. The rules bend in moments of panic, always in favor of institutions deemed too important to fail. Ordinary people are expected to absorb the consequences, adjust expectations, and move on. Over time, money stops feeling like a reliable store of value and starts feeling like a melting asset. The act of saving, once considered virtuous, becomes irrational. Cash is something you rush to convert into something else before it loses more purchasing power. Housing, stocks, collectibles, even speculation itself become survival strategies rather than optional risks. This distortion reaches far beyond finance. It reshapes behavior. When money no longer rewards patience, people stop planning for the long term. Families delay having children. Workers hesitate to specialize deeply in a craft. Everything becomes transactional, short-term, and reactive. Life begins to feel like a race against an invisible clock that's constantly accelerating. In many parts of the world, the damage is not subtle at all. Entire currencies collapse within a generation. People wake up to find their life savings rendered nearly worthless by decisions made in distant offices. In wealthier nations, the same process unfolds more slowly, disguised behind stable institutions and complex language. But the outcome is similar. The middle class feels increasingly fragile, one shock away from losing everything. What makes this especially corrosive is the absence of accountability. When inflation rises or purchasing power disappears, responsibility is diffused. No single person can be blamed. No clear apology is offered. Instead, people are told that these are global forces, unavoidable trends, or temporary adjustments. The system trains people to accept loss as normal and instability as permanent. At some point, skepticism replaces trust. People begin to question not just policies, but the legitimacy of the system itself. If money can be created endlessly, what does it actually represent? If rules can be rewritten during crises, how real are those rules to begin with? If savings can be erased without consent, was ownership ever truly secure? This skepticism doesn't always turn into rebellion. More often, it turns into quiet disengagement. People lose faith in institutions. They become cynical about promises of reform. They stop believing that playing by the rules will lead to meaningful security. The social contract weakens, not through anger, but through exhaustion. The tragedy is that this loss of trust is rarely acknowledged as a monetary problem. It's framed as political polarization, generational conflict, or cultural decay. But at its core lies a system that forces people to store their time and effort in a unit that cannot be trusted to remain stable. When the measuring stick itself keeps changing, frustration becomes inevitable. Money was meant to simplify cooperation between strangers. Instead, it has become a source of anxiety and division. People argue over wages, prices, and policies without questioning the foundation beneath them. The deeper issue remains unspoken. A money system that depends on human restraint will always fail at scale. As trust erodes, people instinctively search for alternatives, not because they want revolution, but because they want certainty. They want something that doesn't rely on promises, credentials, or emergency meetings. Something that doesn't require faith in decision makers who never bear the full consequences of their choices. This is the emotional and intellectual vacuum where Bitcoin begins to matter. Not as a speculative asset, not as a technological novelty, but as an answer to a very human question. What if money didn't require trust in people at all? Bitcoin did not appear because the world wanted a new investment. It appeared because trust had reached its limit. When people realize that money depends too heavily on human discretion, the search for something different becomes inevitable. Bitcoin was not designed to fix every economic problem. It was designed to remove one specific weakness: the ability of humans to manipulate money. At its core, Bitcoin is an experiment in replacing trust with rules. Instead of asking people to believe in institutions, it asks them to verify a system. Instead of relying on promises, it relies on mathematics. The supply is not decided in meetings. It is written into code. The issuance schedule does not change during crises. It does not respond to political pressure, elections, or public opinion. This is what makes Bitcoin uncomfortable for traditional systems. There is no central authority to appeal to, no emergency lever to pull, no committee to negotiate with. Bitcoin does not care who you are, where you live, or how powerful you think you are. The rules apply equally to everyone, or they apply to no one. For the first time in modern history, money exists that cannot be altered by human emotion. Fear cannot accelerate its supply. Greed cannot dilute it. Good intentions cannot rewrite its foundation. Bitcoin does not assume that people will behave responsibly. It assumes the opposite and designs around that reality. This is a profound shift. Traditional money systems are built on trust in human judgment. Bitcoin is built on the assumption that human judgment is unreliable at scale. By removing discretion, it removes temptation. By making rules predictable, it restores the possibility of long-term thinking. Bitcoin's scarcity is not symbolic. It is enforced. No matter how much demand grows, no matter how desperate the circumstances become, the system will not produce more than what was promised. This is not because someone is guarding it, but because no one can change it without breaking the system itself. Critics often misunderstand this rigidity as a flaw. They argue that flexibility is necessary to manage complex economies. But flexibility is precisely what allowed money to become a political tool. What Bitcoin offers instead is certainty. Not safety from volatility, but safety from arbitrary change. This distinction matters. Bitcoin does not promise stability in price. It promises stability in rules. And in a world where every other monetary system can be rewritten overnight, that alone is revolutionary. Owning Bitcoin is not about opting out of society. It is about opting into a system where value is not dependent on trust in people you will never meet. It is a form of monetary self-defense, a way to store value in something that cannot be diluted by decisions made elsewhere. Bitcoin does not require belief. You do not need to trust its creator. You do not need to trust its developers. You do not even need to trust the network itself. You can verify every rule, every transaction, every unit of supply. This is a level of transparency that no traditional financial system can offer. In this sense, Bitcoin is less like a currency and more like a protocol, a set of rules that anyone can use, but no one can control. It does not care if governments approve of it. It does not ask permission to exist. It simply continues to function, block by block, regardless of human opinion. For individuals living under unstable monetary regimes, this is not an abstract idea. It is survival. Bitcoin becomes a way to escape currencies that collapse without warning. For those in more stable economies, it is a hedge against a future that increasingly resembles the past. The most important thing Bitcoin offers is not wealth. It is choice. Choice to step outside a system that quietly taxes savings through inflation. Choice to hold money that cannot be altered by political necessity. Choice to plan decades ahead without fearing that the rules will change mid-game. Bitcoin does not claim to be perfect. It does not solve inequality. It does not eliminate risk, but it removes one critical vulnerability. Money controlled by humans will always reflect human flaws. Money governed by rules does not care about power, status, or influence. This is why Bitcoin is best understood not as an attack on existing systems, but as an escape from them. An escape from currencies that require constant faith in restraint. An escape from a world where money is shaped by discretion rather than principle. And once that possibility exists, it cannot be unseen. Because when people realize that money does not have to be this way, the old system begins to feel less inevitable and more like a choice they were never told they had. True financial freedom has never been about having unlimited money. It has always been about having reliable rules. The ability to plan a life, to think in decades instead of quarters, depends on knowing that the foundation beneath your decisions will not shift without warning. This is where Bitcoin quietly changes the conversation. Bitcoin does not eliminate struggle. It does not guarantee prosperity. What it offers instead is something far more rare in modern finance: consistency. The rules tomorrow will be the same as the rules today. No emergency will justify rewriting them. No authority can declare an exception. In a world built on constant intervention, that restraint feels almost unnatural. When money is no longer subject to human discretion, responsibility returns to the individual. There is no one to blame for debasement. No committee to hope will act wisely. This can feel uncomfortable at first. Freedom always does. But it also restores something that modern systems have quietly taken away: accountability paired with autonomy. Under a predictable monetary system, time regains its meaning. Saving is no longer an act of faith, but a rational decision. Long-term thinking becomes possible again. People can choose patience without being punished for it. The frantic chase for yield begins to lose its grip when standing still no longer guarantees loss. This shift extends beyond finance. When money stops being a source of constant anxiety, people relate to work differently. They are less pressured to speculate, less tempted to compromise values for short-term gain. Creativity, craftsmanship, and responsibility begin to matter again because the future is not being silently taxed. Bitcoin does not force this transformation. It simply allows it. Participation is voluntary. Belief is optional. Those who see value in a system governed by rules can opt in. Those who prefer discretionary control can remain where they are. For the first time, monetary choice exists alongside monetary authority. Critics often ask whether Bitcoin can replace existing currencies, but that question misses the point. Bitcoin does not need to replace anything to succeed. Its existence alone changes the balance of power. It introduces competition into a space that has long been monopolized by trust-based systems. What Bitcoin ultimately challenges is not governments, but assumptions. The assumption that money must be flexible. The assumption that stability requires control. The assumption that people should accept erosion as inevitable. By proving that a monetary system can exist without human oversight, Bitcoin reframes what is possible. This does not mean a future without institutions or laws. It means a future where the most fundamental layer of economic coordination is no longer subject to political cycles, where money behaves more like gravity than policy, predictable, indifferent, and fair in its application. For some, Bitcoin will remain an abstract idea. For others, it will become a lifeline. And for a growing number of people, it will represent something quietly revolutionary: the ability to exit a system that no longer aligns with their values. Bitcoin does not promise a utopia. It offers an alternative rooted in the recognition that human nature does not scale well with unchecked power. That rules, once set and unchangeable, can protect people better than intentions ever could. In the end, Bitcoin is not about technology. It is about trust, or rather the absence of required trust. It is about choosing a system where honesty is enforced by design, not requested as a virtue, where fairness emerges from structure, not hope. Money will always shape behavior. The question is whether it will amplify human weakness or constrain it. Bitcoin chooses constraint. It chooses predictability over flexibility, rules over rulers, mathematics over manipulation. And for those who have spent a lifetime watching the value of their time quietly diluted by decisions they never agreed to, that choice feels less like speculation and more like escape. Not an escape from society, but from a monetary game that was never designed to be fair.